Welcome to VINTed with Scout Driscoll. Come along with me on my journey into the wine world, where I share thoughtful conversations with wine industry leaders. Get ready for marketing insights from branding and design to sales and social media, and the answer to the ultimate question: what moves wine? I'm Scout Driscoll, founder of VINTed Studio and host of VINTed, where I ask top leaders in the wine industry, how do you move wine? Past episodes include conversations on capturing culture with Kim Lewis of Old Orleans Wine and with Jake Whitman, founder of Really Good Box Wine. On today's episode, we're chatting with Kenny Likitprakong, owner and winemaker of Hobo Wine Company. But before we dive in, here's a quick word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by VINTed Wine Branding and Design, where rich storytelling meets smart design. At VINTed, our studio goes beyond the label, guiding wine brands through strategy-rich branding and packaging evolutions, websites, point of sale, and more. Our work with Cooper's Hawk has helped them grow the nation's largest wine club with over 540,000 members. You can learn more about VINTed at VINT.studio, and for a free label audit for your brand, email me at hello@vint.studio. I am so excited today to welcome Kenny Likitprakong, owner and winemaker of Hobo Wine Company based in Sonoma County. For the last 20 years, he's been making wines from all over California, and he's tried to balance the building of his business with his life while taking care of his employees. He prioritizes decreasing the winery's carbon footprint by making smart environmental decisions that are good for the planet and for the brand. Kenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Excited to have you on today. I really, I want to kick us off by sharing a little bit more about Hobo Wine Company. What are some of the wines you produce? I know you've got lots of different labels, but just give us a little bit of a summary of your winery and everything you've been doing for literally the last 20 years. Go.
Yeah. Okay. So, like you said, we've been doing this for 20 years. So we started in 2002. It's evolved a lot. The first year was kind of accidental in some way. Actually, that's not right. It wasn't accidental, but it was, barely dipping a toe into making my own wine. I think I produced about 100 cases of Zinfandel from Dry Creek Valley. And then, just like a lot of people, you're kind of 100 cases doesn't seem like a lot of wine, but all of a sudden it's way too much wine to drink. It's too much wine for all of your friends to drink. And so you get faced with having to sell it. And that was a part of this I never thought about. Like, I went to school to study viticulture and enology, and like, they didn't teach us anything about selling wine. I didn't think anything about selling wine. I didn't really want to think about that. And then all of a sudden, you've got 100 cases again, which isn't a lot of wine, but it's a lot of wine to drink. And I got forced with thinking about what to do with it. And then you start essentially teaching yourself how to sell wine. And then it's kind of, it's like a trap, because you sell a little, then you got to make a little more, then, and for the various things sort of, pull on you. And I feel like my business in a lot of ways has been a result of, or has grown as a result of, market demand or certain situations that we've gotten into with distributors. Or it's never been like a business plan that like, oh, we're going to do this and then we're going to do that. So anyway, we grew from about 100 cases to a couple hundred cases to a couple, to then I think at a certain point, 1,000 cases. And then at that point we were a few years in, and then it just keeps kind of going. And then you start thinking about it economically, and economies of scale, and things kind of grow as a result of that. So that's kind of how we got to be like a winery, I suppose, is just at a certain point we were just making enough wine to warrant that. And then along the way, like when I was in school, both my wife and I were very focused on sustainable agriculture in school. And so that's always been a guiding principle to the business. I think our, I guess, definition of what sustainability is has somewhat changed over the years. I think in the beginning we thought about the farming part of it. And then now, I guess it probably being older, as well as having owned a business now for 20 years, we start to think more about what sustainability means as a employer, what it means as a business in a community, what community we're functioning in, and of course still the agriculture and like what our effect on um, the environment is, and our our immediate environment, the larger environment, the planet, etc. Um, so these are like the things I think that have been in our heads and kind of guided the evolution of our business over the years. But then we've also just made like a bunch of wines and had fun with the packaging, and got to work with a lot of artists that we love, um, and of course had a few parties and that kind of stuff along the way too.
I love your approach, and I love how earnest and authentic your brand is and your style. And I think that the kind of figure it out journey that you just kind of alluded to, and kind of solving each next step, each next problem as it arises, is kind of how I operate my business. I always joke that I'm a FitFo entrepreneur, figure the F out. That's just how I operate. But I think that like looseness comes across in how you talk about your brand, how you present your wines, what your labels look like, the variety, and the aesthetic of your brand. So I think it's such a wonderful kind of hodgepodge and mix. And I think what you just said really comes through in who you guys are. So kudos for that.
Thank
What
you.
kind of wine are you, like, how many different labels are you producing each year? Like, what kinds of wines do you like to focus on?
Um, we probably produce something like 30 wines a year. There's been that number's been a little bit down as a result of fires in 2020, and kind of low yields in 2021, and but 20 to 30 wines a year is there's been some years where that number's been a little higher, and that's um, there might have been some bad decisions on my point, or on my uh, from me, just like getting too excited about things and not staying focused. But yeah, 20 to 30 wines. Sorry, there was another part to that question that I forgot.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just wondering how many wines you're producing, then what kind of wine?
What kind of wine? Right. Well, I think our focus on like what we've never been very focused on a particular variety of wine, and that's kind of been, I guess, part of what we do is just make a lot of different things. I think it keeps things more fun for me. It keeps things more fun at the winery, and it's also one of the like kind of unique things about California is there's so many different grape varieties growing here, so many different grape varieties that grow well here, and then essentially no laws uh, dictating what varieties we're allowed to grow and what wines we're allowed to make and what we're allowed to call. So we have a lot of freedom.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the fact that we're not tied to a particular estate, that we're not, that we can source grapes from wherever we want essentially, and uh, has just kind of led us down this path of having like tons of different wines.
What a fun sandbox
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
to play in. And what's your annual production right now?
Um, ish like 30,000 cases. It's probably less in 2021. Yields were down a little less in 2020. I think the last really normal year we had was 2019, and I think it was around 31,000 cases.
A few more
So
than 100.
yeah, it's grown from 100 to that.
Yeah,
And
that's no small feat.
right. It's not a giant production, but it's enough to stay busy with.
Yeah, and I can't wait to dig into a little bit more about like you said, having to figure out how to sell wine, like what you learned and some of your inspiration. But yeah, I mean, after 20 years, I mean, that's no joke, and it's amazing. I always think about being the startups versus the end ups. Like how does it feel to be an end up in the wine industry?
Right. Yeah. Well, uh, I guess most of the time it feels really good. I'm really proud of the fact that um, I mean I'm literally like the only person I know in my friend group who actually does what they studied in college. That's actually not true. I think I've one good friend who studied art in college, and he's still doing that. But it's so abnormal to like actually like study something specific in school and then make a living doing that. And so I've been on the same path for a really long time, and I still like it. I'm still excited by wine. I'm still excited by the people that I meet in wine. I still think there's a lot for us to figure out. There's a lot for us to do. There's a lot of ways we can improve. Um, so I feel really grateful to have ended up where I have, and to be able to make a living doing this and support my family doing this and still enjoy it, and not um I'm not thinking I'm not thinking about like really like what else could I be doing or how could life be different. I'm pretty content to just like work within what's been created already.
Yeah. But I feel like, and I don't know, I get the feeling that you and I are very symbiotic in terms of the way we operate our business when it started. Like my business was started in 2003, like, so I'm on my 20th year of business, so not too far behind you. And, I think for me, there's two kinds of entrepreneurs. There's the kind who comes out with this like huge goal right out the bat, right out the gate. Like, this is my goal. I will accomplish it. I'm going to get all these investors. Let's do this very specific plan. And then there's entrepreneurs who just love what they do and they want to do it in any way they can. And they start doing it and there's a problem. So they address that problem and then they keep doing it more. And then, okay, now I have to take care of 2 employees. So I got to get more work and then, more business. And then you grow and grow and grow. And you just kind of what is that next step that you're always addressing? And so that's something where I feel like you and I, like we do what we do out of passion. We didn't just like buy a winery or buy a design firm to make money. We crafted this and honed it from the very beginning. And I think that's really, at least in my opinion, very laudable and super exciting. So congrats on all of your continued success. So in terms of, emergent wineries or people who haven't been doing this for 20 years, any advice for people who kind of want to take a walk in your footsteps? What's the Cliff's Notes of some things that you would recommend to them?
um I mean, I think the honesty is huge. Like I think it's really important to um be aware of the things that you know, but also be more aware of things that you don't know. Not be afraid to ask for help, and just not like bullshit your way through anything. I've always found when dealing with customers or employees or really anybody that people appreciate when you don't know something,
Mm.
and that served me well a lot. For instance, like if I'm out selling wine, sometimes like if you're the person selling the wine and you're there behind the bottle, people expect that you know everything, but you don't always know everything. And there's been a lot of times where I've just needed to tell people I just don't have the answer. I don't know why this happened this way or why, and not try to like make something up. I think it's really okay to not have an answer. And that's one thing. I mean, that's not specific to the wine industry. I think that in general, like, especially these days, like people can sniff out when something's not real. Um, and so, I mean, that would also, I would say, like, keep things real, keep it real to yourself. Like that's what we've always done as a brand. Is, I mean, there's really like, there's not a lot behind our brand creation other than doing things that we think are cool and that we hope other people will think are cool. Um, a good friend of mine who helps us with design work and stuff and has the entire for the last 20 years. He's like a high school friend of mine. Uh, we talked about it in the beginning. It's like we grew up skateboarding. The only business I knew anything about before getting into this was like skateboarding and snowboarding business. And so all of our inspiration came from that. And we always joked around that we were like a skateboard company making wine. And that was real for us. It felt like
Yeah.
something we could relate to. It was something that we could believe in. And we didn't like try to create an identity that wasn't us. And so yeah, keep things real.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, it kind of makes me think about your tagline on your website, sooner or later, your favorite wine. Like it just has that raw irreverence and that playfulness that I think comes through very, very well in that brand. Um, your brand definitely reminds me a little bit of someone else I had in the podcast, Ed from Tank Garage. And they have a very, same like punk skate aesthetic kind of inspiration. And I just really gravitate towards those brands. And I think that younger demographics do as well. The idea of having to know every single thing about wine is what stopped younger people from enjoying wine for so long. And the approachability that's kind of infusing itself into the industry through brands like yours, I think is really making it more accessible and less precious, and something that you can enjoy anytime, not just on a fancy date at a restaurant or for your anniversary. Like, make wine something that we all enjoy and love every day. And I love that you guys are fighting the good fight on that. In terms of, bossing, you were talking about in your bio how like you just you just want to take care of your employees. Like, I really identify with that as well. My number one goal for me is making sure my team has the support of me and they have growth and they can retire and have babies and buy houses and all those things. Do you think there's any improvement for how wineries take care of their staff, or is there anything that you would change about the industry?
There's so many things I would change about the industry, but I don't. There's not somebody to blame for these things. I think one of the things that's very difficult in the wine industry is there's a perception that there's a lot of money there, and I think. And I honestly don't know this firsthand. Again, this goes back to what I was just saying. It's like, these are things I might assume that I don't actually know, but I think a lot of the money in the wine industry didn't come from the wine industry. It comes from other businesses. Yeah. And so there's a lot of fancy places, like you drive up and down the Napa Valley and you see a lot of fancy places, but I don't know that those places were built on money that came from selling bottles of wine. And so, but it does create this perception that there's a lot of money in wine. And it's difficult because, for one, there's a long turnaround time on wine. It's like you make the investment in it, and it's often 2 to 3+ years before you see any kind of return on that investment. The cost of producing a bottle of wine is very high. I mean, now it's even astronomically high in the last couple of months, but previous to that, it was already high. At least in our business, the margin is nothing like you would see in like a tech business or something. It's small. And so it's hard to figure out like how to provide. And then on top of all of that, we're in California, where the cost of living is incredibly high. Yeah. And so I stress on this all the time. It's like, how do we balance, how do we find a place where we can have employees who can enjoy, the same quality of life that somebody at a tech company might, but have them working at a winery or in a vineyard. And I haven't figured this out yet. Like, we struggle with this. This is the thing I stress on the most, is like, how we really honestly can't even be competitive with these other industries in terms of what we can provide for our employees. I think it's just like 3 years ago or 4 years ago now that I figured out how to provide healthcare for my employees. I mean, that was a huge leap for us financially, just to take that on. It was like, it's for sure one of the best things we've ever done. And like, it was a goal for years before we even were able to do it. But I don't have any employees that own their own homes. And that there might be various reasons for that. It might not, some of them are young or whatever, but nonetheless, it's like, I wish that in terms of like, how could the wine industry change? It's like, it'd be great if everybody working in a cellar was making the kind of salary that they could go out and buy a house in Sonoma County, but it's just not happening.
Yeah, and the fields, like there's just so many people who go into making wine that are underpaid.
Right. And yeah, and I don't think that it's a situation where there's somebody on top making all the money. It's just, there just isn't. It's just a very unbalanced business. So if I could change something, I think it would be, I wish every consumer could just afford and want to drink $50 bottles of wine every night, and that would be great because that would fix all these problems. But I don't expect that either, and I don't think that's realistic because it's just a compounded problem.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I know that's something that so many other wineries struggle with. Um, Moving on to kind of packaging, branding, marketing. Talk to me about your name, Hobo. And then some of the names of your other labels too, because I definitely identify you've got one called Camp, which obviously VINTed is a division of Sign Scout, and my name is Scout. So we definitely love the whole camp theme. We have a label called Edith. My daughter's name is Edie. So I'm like, ooh, fun. Just some personal anecdotes. But talk to me about Hobo and kind of how you find your creative muse there.
Yeah, so Hobo came from I guess when we started in 2002, or when I started this in 2002, I had, now we have our own winery. We talked about how it's leased, and we have vineyards that are leased, but we didn't have any of that. No leased vineyards, no leased winery. Didn't have a truck, didn't have any employees, didn't have anything. And what we were doing at the time, which is very common now, is go to one vineyard, buy grapes there, and then go to a winery that wasn't ours and custom crush it there, essentially. Or at the time, I was like the winemaker at a winery that was allowing me to make some wine, but then go to a different vineyard and buy some grapes there and take it to, I think by year 2 of Hobo, we were making like 3 wines at 2 different wineries, and the 3 wines were coming from 3 totally different appellations. And so there was this idea that I had about hobo winemaking, where you travel around, get grapes from different places, make wine at different places. I've also always really loved Americana and that kind of era of American history. And a lot of our concepts, I think, are inspired by that, where I'm a big fan of Woody Guthrie. The whole Folk Machine brand is inspired by, is thematically inspired by Woody Guthrie. The hobo thing also tied into that. I can remember when that name. Oh, I guess what I also would like to say is, at the time, so this is 2001, I guess, going into 2002. The one winery I really remember being kind of championing the idea of sourcing grapes was Siduri, and Adam Lee at Siduri. And really, I didn't, at least, I'm sure there were others, but I didn't know of anybody else doing that. And so when we started doing that, we wanted that story to be part of our brand, I guess. And so that's kind of also where the Hobo name came from, and not try to pretend like we were an estate driven brand and had a fancy, winery with a big vineyard in the back. We wanted to just sort of have it be part of our story, what exactly it was that we were doing. I think other people were doing that, but like I said, Siduri was the one that I was aware of, and I felt like that was a very new thing at that time. Now it's very common. I remember going out to sell wine, in those days, and trying to explain to people what we were doing, and people didn't really understand. They didn't understand that we didn't have a vineyard. And how did we get grapes if we didn't own a vineyard? And the whole concept was very new. And I don't find myself ever explaining that anymore. So I think it's pretty accepted. And then so that was 2002. Hobo started in 2002. Banyan also started that year. And then it seemed like every couple of years for a while, we would start a new project. And for me, the new project always felt so different and new that it didn't fit into the old project. And so the Folk Machine started in 2005, Ghostwriter started in 2008, Camp started in 2011. Edith and Ida is actually, that's my wife's wine. She makes one wine under that label. Those are our daughter's names. So we have a daughter named Edie as well.
Really?
And then we started doing a keg project that we called Workbook. And so these things evolved, and in retrospect, you look back 20 years and it's well, maybe they're not as different as we thought they were at the time. Maybe it could have all been the same thing. But it seems to be working for us. It's fun. It's kind of like making all the different wines, having all the different brands is fun. And it allows us to have like a lot of different labels and do different things with the packaging. And it's more work, but I also feel like it's more fun and like keeps things interesting.
Yeah. It's like Design Scout and Vint. Why not? Why not have two brands for the relatively same thing? So in terms of sales and marketing, like, do you guys have a lot of outbound marketing that you're doing? Is it really just word of mouth, wine club? Like, let's talk a little bit about how you're distributing and then how you're increasing the sales in those channels.
We are probably about 97% distributing through the 3-tier system.
Okay.
So that means we sell our wine to distributors or importers in other countries who then turn around and sell our wine to restaurants and retailers. That's our primary way of doing business. It has been since we started. In 2008, we opened a tasting room in downtown Healdsburg, and we had that for close to 5 years. We had a wine club. We had all of these. We had like all the direct to consumer type of stuff going on, and I just, for a number of reasons, but a lot of it had to do with having small children at the time and finding the tasting room and events that become part of a tasting room to be pretty demanding for like our family. Mm-hmm. And then also of course the recession was part of it too. And it was a lot of work. It wasn't like a booming time for tasting rooms. But anyway, we had it for about 5 years. And I think in that 5 years, we discovered that we were more comfortable and enjoyed selling wine to our distributors more than we enjoyed the tasting room and the sort of day-to-day of like having a retail store. It was, again, like it had a lot to do with just having a small family and the hours. Like I've always found like I can work, like, especially when my kids were young, I could spend time with them. And then when they went to bed, I could work. And then I could kind of do everything that way. But like the tasting room didn't really work like that. You couldn't, it kind of directly competed with time that I could spend with my kids. Yeah. And so anyway, so we shut that down in 2013. And that's also the same year that we moved into our current winery. And the two are, the winery's in Santa Rosa, the tasting room was in Healdsburg. And it's like 30 minutes. It was just a lot of driving. It just wasn't making sense for us. And so we host tastings at the winery now in the facility, but we don't have like a tasting room or anything like that anymore. So sorry, back to the original question. We distribute wine through the 3-tier system. We sell wine to not every single state in the United States, but most of them. We sell wine outside the United States to we probably have like 8 or 10 pretty active countries buying wine from us. We have others that are less active. We do a little bit of business with like national wine clubs and stuff like that. And then for marketing, we don't do anything really. We've never had a marketing plan. I think we try to have relationships with people. I try to have relationships with our distributors. I guess that's our marketing plan, is to just communicate with the distributors. And so I guess there's like something like probably 60 people that I'm communicating with versus, and then hoping that they're communicating with their people. And then those people, I guess, like you said, it's word of mouth. That's what we've depended on. We try to do the social media thing a little bit. We don't have any like real professionals. Like my wife does some stuff on Instagram. We have a woman that works at the winery who helps do some of that kind of stuff. I think we have a Facebook page. I'm not even sure. I've never seen it. I've never used Twitter. I don't know if we even have that.
But you're not doing any like sales training for the distributors or like any like really active management of them in terms of your brand and like getting it out there.
no really active management.
That's great. I mean, that's how my business ran for 20 years.
Yeah, like I'll go to visit distributors. We'll I'll do market visits. Like, I mean, haven't done one since the pandemic hit, but previously I was doing a little bit of market work, probably on the low side compared to a lot of wineries our size, like, maybe spending like 1 or 2 weeks of the year doing that kind of thing. But I try to be, very available to everybody. Like, I try to always answer my phone. I try to reply to text. I try to make it easy for people to get information from us. I don't know if you can call that a marketing plan, but I think it's part of it. We try to be there to provide information, and make that easy for everybody.
Awesome. I'm so impressed with what you guys have built and how you've grown. All right, I'm going to put your feet to the fire with the hot seat question.
Okay.
But really, what is your number one advice for moving wine and increasing sales?
I thought about this, and I think it's like, I don't know if there's a number one thing. I think it's a lot of things, but kind of going just back to what I was just saying, I think being available is huge. If you're a small company, which we still are, and I think you have to assume that most people have no idea who you are, and most people have no idea what you're doing, including people who are even interested in what you're doing. They really, and so if you're not there to or at least available to answer questions and give people like what they're looking for, then that's frustrating for people. Like, I think we all see that when, like, if you buy something and you have a question about it, or you have a problem with it, or whatever it is, if you can't find anybody to talk to, it's very frustrating. And so I think being available is really huge. I also think being transparent is huge. We try to be as transparent as possible. We try to figure out ways to be transparent with our customers. The fact that we don't see them in a tasting rooms, like, we recently got our winery certified organic. Almost all of our vineyards are certified organic. So because now we have both of those pieces, we're starting to be able to put that the wines are made from organically grown grapes on the labels. And that's I think that kind of communication, like, in some cases with a customer who just picks up a bottle of our wine off of the shelf, that's it. That's all I have right there, is communicating that. So it's like, what can I communicate on this bottle of wine that means something, and that tells a story when you really aren't telling the story. And so I feel like that kind of stuff provides at least a minimum standard, or a minimum of assurance to a customer of what's going on. I also think, as far as, like, if I'm giving advice to like a winery on like what my advice there is like, you got to work your ass off. Like, I've been working my ass off for 20 years. Like, I still probably work a minimum of 60 hours a week, and I've never expected not to. It's like, I don't expect it to get easier. I don't expect selling wine to get easier. It's like, I get up every day and think about selling wine, think about, who our customers are, where they are, what they need. And when there's problems, like, fix them really quickly, and take responsibility when the problems are my fault too. Really, basically take responsibility no matter what, like, even if it's not directly our fault, like, we still want to be responsible for it and make it right.
Absolutely.
Accountability, I think, is huge.
Yeah. I want to be you when I grow up.
What's that?
I want to be you when I grow up. That sounds amazing. Well, thank you for being so candid today, and for sharing so much about your journey and your winery. It's just really fun, and I gotta get some of your wine over here, because it's making me very thirsty. So we've been talking today to Kenny Likitprakong of Hobo Wine Company. Kenny, where can people learn more about Hobo and your other brands and connect with you?
Let's see. I mean, we have hobowines.com. That's our website. I guess there's a decent amount of information there. and our wines are pretty available. They're out there. I know you can. They're in Chicago. They're in most cities, and we're in most states. But you can email us, Kenny at hobowines.com. Like if anybody has questions, like I said, I respond to all of my emails unless they get junk mailed or something.
Awesome. And you're on LinkedIn too, right? Technically.
Maybe. I'm not sure about that one, to be honest.
Yeah. I love it.
Probably better to directly communicate with me.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was really awesome to have you on the show. Appreciate it. And that's all for this week's episode of VINTed. As always, you can head over to vint.studio to sign up to our email list, as well as check out all the links and resources in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support our podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, not LinkedIn if you're Kenny, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at Scout Driscoll and on LinkedIn. So thanks.
Tune in for the next VINTed. Subscribe today. For future episodes, marketing advice, and more, follow me on Instagram at Scout Driscoll. Learn more about VINT's design and branding services for wineries at www.vint.studio.